Okay, good morning everybody and welcome to this special Integration Joint Board meeting. I rule that under Standing Order 5.6, online participation has been enabled for this meeting to allow members of the IJB and officers to attend remotely. Members of the local media are also in attendance via remote link. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be published online for public access after the meeting. Can all participants online please switch off their cameras and mute microphones when not speaking. If you need to speak on any point, please use the raise the hand function in Teams or indicate your wish to speak by signalling on your camera or taking your microphone off mute. Officers are reminded to follow the protocols that have been separately issued with regard to their participation. And before we start the meeting, can I please ask the committee officer to do a roll call for members of the IJB online to confirm that they are present.
Okay. Mr. Campbell?
Present.
Mr. Fraser? I don't think Mr. Fraser's joined yet. Ms. Haswell?
Present.
And Mr. Williamson?
Present.
Ms. Morgan? I don't think she's joined. And Ms. Watson?
Present.
Mr. Sandilands?
Sorry, can I offer Ian's apologies? He's away actually this week.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Adamson?
Present.
Mr. Guyan?
Present.
Dr. Laidlaw? Not present at the moment. I have, and also Ms. Campbell.
Present.
I have apologies if you want me to take them.
Yes, please.
Apologies from Mr. Carroll, Dr. Evans, Dr. Armitage, Mr. Sandilands, and Ms. McFarlane.
I think I might have seen apologies from Denise Morgan at
Okay.
some point over this last week.
I believe you're correct, sorry.
But I can't remember.
Yes, you did.
Yeah,
Yes, you did another meeting. I'll mark her apologies.
Okay, thank you very much. And we'll just move on to the agenda then. Do we have any declarations of interest? I'll just go out around the room and have a look online. I'm not seeing any. Okay, well, we'll move on to our agenda for today. So this is obviously a one-item agenda, but it's a very important item. So I will hand over to Brian, and this will be our response to the National Care Service consultation.
Thank you, Chair. This paper is the culmination of IJB workshops, council-led stakeholder engagement, a variety of conversations to articulate an IJB response and a Shetland response with a Shetland perspective in that response to the National Care Service consultation procedure. As the Chief Officer, I'm grateful that everybody's supported the pulling together of this paper, in particular Jackie Burney from the PMO, the Director of Corporate Services in the Council, Christine Ferguson, and the Deputy Director, Joe Robinson, in their support to pull this together in quite a short time frame. Members will note that our response to the consultation is not answering directly all the questions. The feeling was that there was lots of questions and some ambiguity and some closed questions, and the need for more detail to have a Shetland perspective was very important. So we have laid out our consultation response in the sections that the consultation flowed in and answers some specific questions pertinent to Shetland IJB, but also some broader points that we would like to bring to the attention of via the consultation. We've also added some case studies and some evidence to provide further insight into the current state of system in Shetland, which I think is very important if we're considering changing that. report does have 8 key feedback points. I think the first one is very important, that Shetland is different, that we have a system that is locally designed and locally enabled, and that integration is working in Shetland. There was a few lines in the consultation where it intimated that integration wasn't working, but we feel we had to put across the point that integration is working in Shetland and demonstrating good partnership working at both strategic and operational level. We wanted to highlight that there's a significant risk of what we've termed system shock, which is the introduction of a third body and the infrastructure and resource need that would mean for a small system would, I think, provide a lot of tension within the system. So we've articulated that specifically within the consultation response. We've also wanted to highlight the risk of sustaining the high quality care that's being provided at this moment in Shetland via our health and care services. This particularly the care services, there is additional funding that comes via local authority and the Shetland Charitable Trust to ensure that we at the moment are sustaining high quality and safe services. And we want to highlight the risk that being centrally funded and how that funding may arise needs to be just articulated in our response. And Appendix B in particular demonstrates local authority spend, some benchmarking across Scotland, as well as some IJB specific outcomes from that. We also wanted to highlight just commissioning models and what that might mean, to the new community health and social care boards, and the risk of not being able to bring strategic plans to fruition with a dependency on commissioning of services and partners for the operational delivery, and the risk that may lead to more silo working than what we've got at the minute with our integrated kind of ethos. And we wanted to highlight the risk in that. And with the sort of delivery of services, appendices A and E demonstrate the role of the third sector and the role in realising our strategic plan here in Shetland. And we thought that was important to bring out as well, that it's integration not just across local authority and health board, but also our third sector and our other stakeholders and partners as well. We wanted to highlight that we will be undertaking an island impact assessment with any future legislation or frameworks that are produced with respect to the implementation of a national care service. And finally, we wanted to note that the independent review of adult social care did not include a review of children and justice social work. They weren't part of that review. And we wanted to note that we could comment further without evidence of stakeholder engagement and evidence behind the proposals that are put in there. And maybe that's my final point. We maybe want to be more decisive in saying that we can't support any proposals with respect to children and justice social work in the consultation because of that lack of evidence, and be a little bit more decisive just in what we're putting forward via the consultation. That's the introduction, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions that members of the board may have.
Thank you very much, Brian. Okay, I'll open this up now for questions. I think there's probably some other people on the call that can answer any kind of further details on this. So does anybody have any questions on the response, the proposed response? I'll have a moment to have a look online. I'm not seeing any questions. Robbie, you look like you might be.
Yeah, I'll try and kick things off. As usual, my question's not strictly relevant. I'm beginning to sound like an old record here. Would it be appropriate for individual responses to be made to the survey by individual people rather than just a group thing, because I think the more comment there is on this matter, the better, and individual employees and members of the public might just carry some considerable weight. Would that be appropriate?
I think anybody can respond to the
Yeah.
consultation.
Yeah.
It's public
I'm
consultation.
trying to suggest that we should be encouraging it.
Yeah, no, I think we have encouraged people to do that. And I know staff have been encouraged to complete it.
Good.
So, absolutely. Anybody got any further questions? No. Okay, I was expecting possibly more questions. I think the lack of questions is probably because we have had many sessions where we've discussed this. We've had many workshops. There's an awful lot of work that has gone into this process. So I think the lack of questions is definitely not because people are not interested in the process. It's because the work's already been done before we get here. So before I begin with some of my comments, I just want to put on record my sincere thanks to everyone who's contributed to this consultation. It's come at a time when people are already tired, have been constantly dealing with increased pressures on staffing, and I know that this work has added additional strain. I think the level of engagement at workshops and various other consultation events shows the commitment everyone has to these vital services. And again, pulling all that information together has not been an easy task. So my thanks go to everyone who's allowed us to consider this document here today. I also just want to make it very clear that at this meeting, we are responding to the consultation as an IJB. Oh, I see Jan has his hand up. Do you want to come in at this point, Jan?
Oh, sorry, Chair, I did not want to interrupt you at all. I was just hoping that you would let me in before you moved finally into debate. My observation actually is entirely in line with what you're just saying, which is that this is a response by the IJB, and I would just offer comment just in terms of governance arising from the point that Councillor McGregor just made, and that is that encouraging individuals to respond is perfectly okay, and I think that should be extended to staff, individuals, staff groups, individual members of your IJB, particularly since many of them carry representative roles, albeit non-voting roles, on the board. So all of that is okay. The one thing I would encourage is that in so doing, they do not, they can indicate that they work for or their status for the IJB, but not that they are in any way representing the IJB in making their individual comments, because I would be concerned that there's any sort of a dilution of what is your IJB response. And the IJB should make one response, and then if individuals are responding, make it clear that theirs is an individual response. Thank you. Thanks,
Jan. Yeah, no, that's helpful. Jim, I see you have your hand up. Sorry if I missed it at questions. Do you have a question?
It's really observations I've got, Emma.
All right, okay. Do you want me to just carry on and then I'll let you in? Is that okay?
That's fine.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, just going back to what I was saying and Jan's point, I think whilst we may have different views when wearing other hats, we should be mindful of our roles and have the right conversations in the right place. So today, this is all about the IJB's response. I think it's very clear from this paper and from our workshops and discussions that integration is working well here in Shetland, yet it is still very early days, and change such as this does take considerable time. I do have some serious concerns that what is proposed will seriously diminish what's been achieved and will affect the positive relationships that have been built. I do think if integration is not working well in some areas, then I would suggest we've got many examples of some really good practice that could be used to help those areas develop. The consultation has many areas that are not clear, and one of the main ones for me is the financial case. There's very little information regarding how this will be financed. I appreciate it will be more straightforward to simply fund the new planned boards directly, and I would imagine for Cal that would seem like a much easier solution. However, I've got serious concerns regarding the funding levels. We have a more expensive model of care and a higher cost of living here, and we're lucky to have the additional funding that comes from both the local authority and the charitable trust, as Brian's already mentioned. What will care look like here in Shetland if this isn't recognised and financed accordingly? And what impact will this have on staffing if wages do not rise at the current levels and they stagnate whilst the rest of Scotland catches up? If there's additional layers of staffing required to support the boards, more money will be spent in this area rather than on services, which seems like we could have a lot of duplication for no improvement to outcomes or services. Just touching very briefly on the proposals to include children's services, I agree entirely with the comments in this paper that there's no evidence to support this suggestion at all. For me as an IJB member, my focus has always been on what we can do to help improve the outcomes for our community. In the consultation, I've seen no evidence that the planned proposals will improve the outcomes. We're all part of the IJB because we care about health and care services in Shetland. We want the best for our community. And for me, the ability the IJB has to prioritise its use of resources in a way that allows us to focus on early intervention and prevention is vital. I know we keep making the point that Shetland is different, but that's because it is. We have excellent levels of care for dedicated staff who go above and beyond, and we've seen that particularly evidenced in the last 18 months. When we talk about care here and how we're going to deliver it, we're all aware that it affects each one of us in some way, and our loved ones. This is our family and friends we're talking about. It's not just people that are a long way from us. Having the ability to flex and change that as we need to is something I think is key for Shetland. One size doesn't fit all when it comes to care, and we need to maintain our ability to adapt as the needs of our communities change. I would hope that whatever comes from this consultation takes into account the uniqueness of Shetland and recognises the fact we have invested in our services because we care greatly about our communities. And on that, I will be quiet and I will let somebody else in. Jim? I'm not sure if you're still on mute, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, sorry. I mean, what I would like to make an observation about is paragraph 12. Right, the right to break for carers as carers. Right. It goes on to say Appendix A outlines examples of the system for respite. It's not respite, it should be respite. I mean, respite is when we get firms that give us like the hotel rooms and free meals, etc., for a form of respite for the carers. I'd like that changed if possible, please.
Yeah, that's fine, Brian, so you'll take that on board. Have you got any other comments, Jim?
When we talked about in page 14, wait a minute. Para 31. Right. One of the things that was said in the failure report, and I don't know if we actually discussed it very well, was this idea of integrating strategic planning groups into the IJB. We've made no reference about how we feel about that. This was to do with, bringing more expertise into the IJB. I just wonder if we should say something.
Do you want to maybe come in on that, Brian? I know we've moved on from questions, but I'm
happy to add in a suggestion via the consultation and in that paragraph about integration of strategic planning group that if we're looking at the expansion of voting members, then expertise and experience within the kind of conversation that IJBs will be having. It would be useful to have that strategic planning group maybe input and certainly make that as a suggestion if that would tick the box that Jim's alluding to there.
And the last one I've got is when we were sort of saying how good a job we did and etc., and bringing things out. I mean, I could find no mention of the Anchor project. I feel like that maybe would be worthwhile having a mention. And the good work that we've done for families in respect to the Anchor project.
Okay, Brian, do you want to?
Again, if board's happy with that, we could maybe look at putting that in as an appendix, maybe as one of the more recent anchor reports to demonstrate that. We could link that in with one of the paragraphs as an appendix, if that, again, that would be reasonable for board.
Yeah, is everybody happy with that? Yes, I think it does highlight that we do value the importance of early intervention and prevention, and we invest in that accordingly. So I think it is worth adding that in. Anything else, Tim?
No, that's everything, Emma. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Carl?
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to add that the Chief Financials Officers Group is putting in a response as well, and that has a lot more detail around the finance. But I think we've captured the main thing relevant to Shetland in this response. That is the fact that we're getting a lot of funding from elsewhere. We're getting money for the SIC reserves, we're getting charitable trust funding, and we're also getting money for the NHS top-up payments. But the CFO response has things such as, should the new boards be responsible for assets as well as revenue, because they're thinking that you can only plan in a meaningful way if you had control of our assets, capital and revenue. And the other thing that they were saying is, what type of board will the new body be? They're saying it should be a section 106 public body. That means it can still use reserves under favourable VAT conditions around that. And one of the other things is about that a single finance system would be really beneficial for the new boards, because while we continue to have two separate finance systems, it's very difficult to pool the budgets. We've spoken about that a lot in the past. And if one of you wants to see the CFO response, I'm happy to share that as well. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Carl. That'd be really helpful. I appreciate seeing that if possible. I think it is clear that there's many different people feeding into this, and the more voices that are heard, the better. But I suppose this one is very much focused on what it means for Shetland, and I think it does cover the financial risks that we do face if we don't have that funding. I've got John next, I think.
Thank you very much, Emma. And first of all, my apologies for my late arrival. A few technical problems in here on the Scottish mainland. Actually, that leads me in very neatly to my first point, is that I know I've made jovial comments about this in the past, but this is actually quite a serious point. Is that yet again I see this colloquialism that sneaked into the common parlance of public sector bodies within Shetland of talking about people receiving care off island. Let's get rid of this ambiguity. If you live in Unst, Yell, Walsascaries, Fair Isle, Bressa, off island means you're coming to the Shetland mainland, to Lerwick. So therefore you're leaving things ambiguous. For the last, as long as my life is, as long as that I've been alive, we've heard of people going south or going to the Scottish mainland. Can we please change that within this document so there's no ambiguity and there's no confusion? So our people from our smaller islands within Shetland are not wondering, well, what did he mean by off island? Does that mean I'm leaving Unst and Yell? No. Let's talk about, if people are going out with Shetland, let's say it's out with Shetland, it's south or the Scottish mainland, not this off island nonsense that's sneaked in. So can I please have that changed? On the other matter, very simply, you said, Emma, about putting on an IJB hat. I completely agree. However, my opinion is that we are working in a Shetland partnership, whether it be NHS, IJB, Third Sector, Shetland Islands Council. And that partnership, I believe, is all singing from the same hymn sheet with an absolute desire to get the best outcomes from for the people of Shetland and the service users. So regardless of what forum I'm sitting in, my approach is going to be very consistent. But on the first issue, can I please have this off-island nonsense taken out of the common parlance and make it very clear as to what we mean?
Brian?
Happy to do that and revisit the semantics just around that. Maybe just as mitigation of why that's maybe crept in there is off-island is a terminology we use when we're looking at maybe tertiary care or more specialist care. the budgets are aligned to that kind of terminology as well. I apologise if that has come across as something that diminishes or muddies the kind of clarity about what we're trying to say there. So I can certainly take that away and clarify that with it being about care being provided on mainland Scotland.
Thank you, Brian. It's confusing, it's ambiguous, and it, as you say, it muddies the waters. Let's get back to how it's been for decades and decades, because this is a very much very recent terminology that's crept into the parlance. Let's just stamp it out. Thank you.
Okay, any further comments, John?
No, apart from an absolutely wonderful report, and echo your earlier sentiments, and a huge amount of work that's been put in within a very limited time scale. Very invidious position for all those involved to be placed under, and I have the utmost admiration for what they've managed to deliver in such a short time scale. Thank you.
Thanks very much, John. And I think timescales going forward is going to be the challenge, because whatever comes from this, I have no doubt that it will involve work for all of our staff to feed into. And at a time when everybody's already busy, I do worry that the impact that will have on us trying to achieve the outcomes that we want in our strategic plan. So there is no doubt that this will have an impact. When people are dealing with consultations and are having to hold workshops, they are not dealing with making the differences that we want to make for our community. So there is no doubt that this will impact on services, and it will do for considerable time, even before we see any significant change. I've got Jane next.
Thank you. I would support all the changes that have been before us. Just one line of emphasis really is that we can't lose sight of the importance of local knowledge and relationships. And I think that one sentence kind of sums up quite a bit of the feedback pertinent to Shetland, and it is that local knowledge and relationships, which aligns with Feely absolutely, completely. And I would support what you were saying about children's services and justice, and that the evidence is not there. The Feely report was absolutely central, having lived experience central, and rightly celebrates that and rightly uses that as evidence for their recommendations. However, the same has not been replicated for justice and children's recommendations in the consultation. And I echo thanks to everybody involved in setting up this in such a short timescale, and I support the report going forward with the changes made today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jane. Carl, I'm not sure if your hand is up from earlier or if you want to come back in.
Sorry, I'll take it down. It's just the last time.
That's okay. I just don't want to miss anybody. Does anybody have any further comments? I'm keen that everybody does feel that they can contribute to this if they wish to, because it is really important that we do feel that what we're putting back really does cover everything we want to say as an IJB. No? Not seeing any? No further comments? Okay, so what we're being asked to do is to consider and approve the response. So we've been happy to do that with the changes that have been proposed, and instruct the Chief Officer to submit the response to the Scottish Government in consultation with the Chair, taking into account any amendments. Are we all happy to do that? Yeah?
Happy to propose, yeah.
Yeah, we can take a move and second it.
Can we get seconded for that? Robbie? Okay, so that is that's us completed that process. I do think this very much is the start of a very long process. I am under no illusion that what comes next, in whatever shape that is, will involve an awful lot of work for all of our staff and everybody around this table and virtual table. And at every point, we have to continue to make that really strong case that Shetland is different and what we do here is different, and really emphasise the things that we do really well. So although this feels like the end of a stage of the process, and I know there's lots of people who probably will be very glad when this consultation goes in and they don't have to think about it for a little while, and I don't blame them, but we can't lose sight of the fact that we will continuously have to engage in this process and do it in a positive way to continue to make the case that what we do here is really good and the rest of Scotland could learn a lot from us. So thank you very much for your attendance today, and we will close the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chair.